Brian, the floor is yours. And thank you so
Okay,
much for
thank you,
joining
Dirk.
us.
Thank you. I want to say right from the beginning that our work on this really was stimulated by Audrey Holland, who, many of you may be familiar with her work on rehabilitation and life adjustment and so on. And also Marty Forbes, who's somewhere here in South Carolina, there in South Carolina, who worked on the project for many years. And, want to thank both Audrey and Marty for all their contributions. And many more people will be thanked along the way here. Okay. So data sharing to understand aphasia. And Davida and I are at Carnegie Mellon University, which I guess you see the logo up there. It's some kind of Scottish thistle. Okay, so what are we really trying to do today? Well, mostly what we want to explain are the tools that AphasiaBank provides for both researchers and clinicians. And of course, for research, we're really trying to, in a way, publish articles. Clinicians are trying to assess patients, maybe develop therapies. So those are different goals, but I think that the materials that we provide are useful for both groups of people. And often researchers are clinicians and clinicians are researchers. And then I also want to, beyond going and looking at all the tools, the data, to just briefly review the research findings that have used the data, tools and methods. There's over 250 articles. I'm not going to be able to summarize all that literature, but to give you a sense of the types of issues that we have been using. When I say we, I mean the whole community has been using with these data. Okay, so the place to go to learn the most about AphasiaBank is really the AphasiaBank website, which is one of the TalkBank websites. There are 14 TalkBank websites. I might show you that later, but now I want to focus on AphasiaBank. And I'm actually going to click on that link in a moment. The idea, though, is to encourage you maybe to write down https://aphasia.talkbank.org, so that you can go there and then click around. One of the things is that it's full of many corpus pages because we have corpora. Some of the corpora were collected with a consistent protocol we call the AphasiaBank protocol, and that I think is sort of unique in this area of spoken language corpora. That it's not always the case that data are collected with a consistent corpus protocol, and that really adds a lot of power to comparisons across groups, across patients, and so on. The other thing I want to do is show you the TalkBank DB, which is the TalkBank database, which is a fairly new facility. So let me go to this page, but basically there it is, the same as what you were looking at. But I'm now actually on the web. Now I'm at home. I'm not down at Carnegie Mellon. And as you can see, we're nonetheless getting pretty good connectivity. I think you can look here. We have famous people protocol and many things, test results, demographics. One thing that is, I think Davida will show the grand rounds for students. These are, I may show that too, but I want to first start with this TalkBank DB. So the TalkBank DB is a general facility for searching all of the TalkBank databases, but I want to focus first on looking at AphasiaBank. So if we go to AphasiaBank and we could select aphasia, then we could say, okay, let's look at English. Now, of course, you could look at all these other languages, right? Cantonese and Croatian and Japanese and Mandarin, but we have much more data for English. So certainly, and right now we're speaking English, right? Okay, so we could look at the control participants or the aphasics, or we could look also at non-protocol data. There's a lot of data that we have from other studies or even studies that were close to our protocol, but not exactly in that format. Okay, well, so we'll look at aphasia and maybe we'll go, as you can see here, we have data from all these different places around the United States. Each of these are like aphasia rehabilitation or treatment institutes or facilities. I'll go to the Adler one and select, here we're going to select all of the Adler corpora. So there's 25 Adler corpora, hour-long protocols. We add that to our query and then boom, we search TalkBank, and that's how fast it comes up. It's, you know, it's just blindingly fast. In fact, we can download this. I'm not going to show you the download, but you can download all of the data from that corpus or from the whole of AphasiaBank in this spreadsheet format in just moments. It's, you know, it's remarkable. It's downloaded then in a huge, essentially Excel, you know, comma separated variable CSV file, which then can go into R or Python for, you know, further detailed analysis. Okay, there is a manual for this here, and you know, you can learn how to use it by the, oh, I lost myself. That was not smart. Let me start again. I'm sorry, that was not smart. So as you see here, I'm doing it all over again. English, aphasia, Adler, add to query. Okay, so we're going to search it again, and here we go. Now, once we found all these things, one thing we can do is we could look at all the utterances. So these are all the utterances. Let me stop you for a second because, you know, this is the investigator talking or the participant, always in sequence. Or we could look at the tokens. These are all the words that were spoken in all of these 1 hour protocols, one by one. Or we could look at the token types. These are, you know, going by part of speech, because all of this is tagged morphosyntactically and grammatically for grammatical relations and so on. Okay, so we can, you know, and filter all of these things. Or we could look at n-grams, which is very interesting to look at, say, a sequence of, say, three words. What are the most common 3-word you know, phrases? And as you might guess with aphasics, the answer is, I don't know. You know, you ask a question and the most common answer is, I don't know. So, you know, and people could really make more use of this kind of n-grams. Another tool we have is what we call the corpus query language over here, where you could look at a word like, say, I'm going to put in my, and we'll insert that as a word, and then follow it up like my, any noun that follows my, and we could insert that. And we do that search for that in the corpus, and we'll find my family, my daughter, and we could download all these data and do further analysis of what are people talking about. Mostly it's their family, which is kind of, you know, because, you know, well, for various reasons, right? So that's the TalkBank DB, and we're adding more and more visuals to that. We also are building a system we call collaborative commentary, which will allow you to go to different transcripts and essentially see them one by one. Let me go back here to transcripts. And if you want, you can go right from here to a given transcript, such as Adler 11A. And here you can see this interview with this fellow who's actually a global aphasic. And here we could talk about.
For instance, you could tell me about a trip you took, or whatever you'd like to talk about.
Yeah. So basically, I won't talk you, but he ends up describing the trip he took by drawing an airplane. So he really is globally aphasic, but really good at drawing and gesturing and so on. So I think one learns a lot about individual participants by looking at these complete things, but you also can study a lot across participants. So that's what I wanted to say about TalkBank DB. It really gives you a link to also this thing called the TalkBank browser, which is separately, you can also get to the TalkBank browser from the web page. Here you see browsable database. I could click on that, but right now I'm going to move on. Lots of different areas. Okay, so TalkBank principles. I want to just describe a little bit about what we've been doing, not just in AphasiaBank, but also in other areas of spoken language. Actually, a lot of this began with our work in child language, in the child language data exchange system. We've tabulated now that there are something like 8,000 articles that were based on the data in childs. And right now in AphasiaBank, we're talking, you know, several hundred, but you know, over time, the number of publications based on the data for any of these databases increases and increases. You know, there's a lot of stuff on the web for written language. And you can get, you know, the whole of the Gutenberg library, Gutenberg Galaxy or whatever it's called, and all of Google Books. But spoken language is harder to get at, and particularly spoken language where the transcript is linked to the audio, which, as you saw, or linked to the video on the utterance level. Now, you know, for people who are interested in aphasia, they may also want to look at some somewhat related language disorders like language in TBI, RHD, right hemisphere, dementia, stuttering, ASD, SLI. So we have separate databases in those areas. Not really, well, the RHD uses the same protocol, stuttering uses a different protocol, and so on. So these other areas are perhaps not quite as tightly organized as AphasiaBank, but they're interesting data. All of the domains use the same transcript format, which is called chat. And you know, that's something you have to learn how to use when you want to transcribe data for AphasiaBank. Once you've transcribed in chat, you can then run the CLAN programs. And there's just like all this stuff you can do for automatic, I guess you call it canned analysis of these transcripts that give you something like, you know, 30, 40 measures all at once on a given transcript. And I've already shown you TalkBank DB. I showed you a little bit of the TalkBank browser. Another principle is that we try to be interoperable with other formats. So those would include things like Elan, even SALT formats that come out for some of the child language disorders, literature, and you know, various other transcript formats. We have about 12 that we are, you know, able to convert back and forth to chat. The new TalkBank DB system is fantastic in terms of providing you with version control. You can really know exactly when it was that you did an analysis based on a certain set of data, and that is going to provide replicability of your study. If you want to see if someone else can replicate it or replicate it with slightly different measures and so on. So that, I think, is important for this whole sort of not just open science, but also reproducible science. You know, another big goal, I think, of databasing is to be survivable. And so we have agreement with the CMU library that they will essentially support in perpetuo availability of the data. Also working with the governing board to kind of make it so that many people are involved in the governance so that we can make sure that these things continue really across generations. Okay, oops, is that my next page? There we go. For contact info, if you are interested in, you do need a password for AphasiaBank, so you'll have to contact either Davida or me to get the password. Actually, Davida is the maven for the password, so best to contact her. But either one. And all faculty at university and licensed clinicians are eligible, and even some additional people that we can really track. We're a little bit leery about involving commercial enterprises. We don't want them to use the data in their products, but they can use the data to test algorithms. Okay, so that is, yeah. So why do we have data sharing? I suppose that, you know, I mentioned some of this, you know, obviously replicability is important. And really to be able to focus on the same core set of data, but different ways, it's, you know, that's really been powerful for child language and really other fields too. One of the big areas that we're now pushing is automatic speech recognition for dementia. When can we use those methods to predict when a person is going to be, you know, going into mild cognitive impairment and so on. So that is, you know, something we have a focus on the same set of data for doing the testing of those algorithms. Okay, so we talked about constant format and so the protocol. Basically, there of course are these principles of respecting the rights of participants. Which is to, you know, the data are not really de-identified because you have the video image, you might not know their names or where they come from, but you know, it's important not to let the data out into YouTube or something like that. And most crucially, to cite references when you use the corpus to give, citations for, the data you've used. So these are some of the people to be thanked for, some of the institutions. These are places. I guess I really, if I had a list of the names of all the people that have contributed, it would just be, more slides. And then we also have the list of the people who have written articles based on all of this, would be another set of slides. So it starts to get a little overwhelming. Okay, Davida, let me pass it on to you. So I have to stop sharing, I believe.
Hi, everybody. And again, thank you so much, Dirk, for including us in this wonderful series. We're really pleased to be a part of it. I'm going to start by talking about, in more detail, what's in the shared database. What are the resources we can use to understand aphasia? And I hope it's okay, but I'm going to keep the AphasiaBank website up alongside the PowerPoint to keep showing you where all of this information lives and how you can access it. I know that makes everything a bit small, but since this talk is about the shared database, I want you to know where all these goodies are stored so you can share them. So just follow along. And then my hope is, as Brian said, that you'll feel more comfortable and empowered to explore on your own. And for those of you who already know your way around the website, well, maybe you'll discover some new nooks and crannies that you hadn't found yet. So shortly after the AphasiaBank grant was funded, a group of aphasiologists met and hammered out the elements of what should be included, as Brian said, also in this standard discourse protocol that all SLPs all over the country and Canada, we should add, thank you, Linda Wozniak, would administer to people with aphasia and then contribute to AphasiaBank. So these are the discourse genres and tasks that ended up being included in the AphasiaBank discourse protocol. It starts with 4 free speech samples, probing with a question first, how do you think your speech is these days? Then asking the person to tell about their stroke, then about their recovery, and then about an important event in their lives. For controls, we ask about an injury or an illness instead of the stroke. Then there are 3 picture descriptions. 2 are sequenced pictures, and 1 is the single cat in a tree picture from Nicholas and Brookshire. Then the Cinderella storytelling task, which is done as it's described in the literature. And even to be as consistent as possible, we actually mail people the same paperback version of the book to show before the retelling. Then finally, there's a procedural discourse task asking people to explain how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, unless you're in Australia, in which case it's a Vegemite and cheese sandwich. And then, as Brian said, also, in addition to these discourse tasks, the people with aphasia also do a battery of tests that includes the WAB, the short form of the Boston naming test, the verb naming test, and a few others. So the database includes test results and, of course, demographic data on all participants. So all of this information I just summarized is available here at the website. So in the protocols section, if I click on AphasiaBank protocol, you see another set of links here. And just to point out a few highlights, this one has a script that we created to help make the administration of the discourse tasks as consistent as possible across sites and investigators. Then you see multiple links to test battery materials. And then I'll point out this link for the protocol pictures. So here, for example, is one of the sequenced pictures, the broken window task. And I can also point out, we actually have all of the pictures from the, I should probably get rid of this, from the Cinderella book here as well, that we send out to people, but is also available online. Okay. And let me also point out that the results section here has a link to the test results for all the participants and the demographics for all the participants. So that's where you can find all of that material. Again, it's password protected, so I'm not even going to try to bring it up now. Okay. Now, that was the standard discourse protocol where everyone does all the same tasks. The database also has lots of other collections of media, files, and transcripts that have been contributed by various researchers. And Brian mentioned this as well. These can be found in the database section if we go, for example, here to non-protocol English. So these contributions include a variety of corpora like WOB picture descriptions, cookie theft picture descriptions, conversations, story retells, narratives, and more. And so if you click on the corpus you're interested in, you get to a corpus page. We can try Hopkins here. This is a corpus that was contributed by R.G. Hillis. It has people with aphasia describing the new cookie theft picture with some repeat administrations. So if we click on Hopkins, we learn more about this corpus. And if you haven't seen the new cookie theft picture, there's a link to it here, and it is a hoot. So you might want to go check that out. Okay. Also, in this non-protocol English section of the website, you can find videos and some transcripts showing a number of aphasia assessments. On this slide, the ones listed at the bottom, like the Boston naming test, the verb naming test, and the AphasiaBank repetition test, those are in the videos with the AphasiaBank discourse protocol. But the first two here, the quick aphasia battery by Stephen Wilson, and then the gray oral reading test corpus from Kimberly Smith in South Alabama, are really interesting corpora that can be found here in this non-protocol section. So again, if we scroll down, we see QAB. We can click on that and learn more about this corpus that Stephen Wilson contributed. And then also the South Alabama corpus down here that Kimberly Smith contributed. Okay. Now, in terms of treatment corpora, we'd love to have more, but we are grateful. Let me go back here. We are grateful to have two sets of data from script training programs. And one is from Julius Friedrichsen in South Carolina, and one is from Gretchen Szabo at the Adler Aphasia Center in New Jersey. So those are here again in the database section under script training. And if you go to the website, to the link there for Adler, you find out more about this particular corpus that was contributed from Adler. And same thing for the Friedrichsen corpus, tells you all about the program, the participants, the samples, and so forth. Back here in group therapy, we actually have a very rich collection of videos from a number of universities and stroke centers. So if I click on group sessions, you can see all the corpora that we have. They're not transcribed yet, but these videos show a range of types of aphasia group therapy sessions, different treatment models, different severities of people with aphasia. And again, here from Duquesne University, you can see lots of information about what kinds of groups they have and so forth. Okay. All right, so to give you a better idea of the size of these shared resources, you can see some numbers here. The AphasiaBank discourse protocol has been completed by 328 people with aphasia and 277 controls. And some of these have also had repeat administrations, usually at intervals of several years apart. Although there's a small collection from Mary Boyle at Montclair State University of repeat administrations within a short period of time to look at test-retest stability. The database even has 174 people with aphasia and controls doing the discourse protocol in these other languages. It got translated into Cantonese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Mandarin, Romanian, and Spanish. For the non-protocol tasks, like the cookie thefts, swab picture descriptions, conversations, the other stuff besides the protocol, the database contains a total of 665 people with aphasia and controls. And then for non-protocol tasks in other languages, there are about 120 people with aphasia and some controls as well. There are over 200 aphasia group therapy videos from those 6 sites I showed you before in the US and Canada. There are a total of 19 people with aphasia in those script training cases, the 2 sites I showed you, and over 100 people with aphasia and controls doing the famous PEOPLE protocol, which was developed by Audrey Holland for use with people who have more severe aphasia. So lots of data, but never enough. Okay, now you know about what resources there are and how to find them at the website, but exactly how can you access these resources? And Brian's already showed you some ways to get to it through that TalkBank DB and to connect through there to the browsable database. But let me show you, point out one thing really quickly. If I go back to the to a corpus page, we can go to Friedrichsen. I want you to notice these links here. So every corpus page has a link for downloading the media and downloading the transcripts. Again, you need password protection for that, or they are password protected, so you need the username and password, which, as Brian said, is available to faculty and licensed clinicians just by writing to us and making that request. If you don't want to download the materials, you just want to view it, you can go here to the browsable database. And you can use this directory up here on the left, as I think Brian was also showing. So, for example, if we go to English and we go to aphasia, which has the collections of people doing the standard discourse protocol. These are all the different sites that have contributed data. We can go to Aphasia Center of West Texas and just look at this first person. One thing I'd like to point out here, obviously you've got the video and the chat transcript. In this ID tier in the chat transcript, you can see the age of the person. This woman's 69 years, 11 months. Her WAB type is BRCA and her WAB AQ is 63.9. And as Brian showed you, you can click on the arrow here to play a few lines, or you can even, just work the video from the controls over here. Let me just play a few lines of this as another example for you to see.
I'm going to be asking you to do some talking.
Yeah, well.
How do you think your speech is these days?
Yeah. Da-da-da-da.
Anything else? Do you remember when you had your stroke?
Yes. It's 2002 days. Now, after New Year's Day, 2000.
2000?
Okay, we'll stop there. And again, just remember, you can use this directory here to find your way around. So if you want to go back to English, again, you could look at any of the control data, the famous people data, the group therapy videos, all of those non-protocol tasks we talked about, for example, the quick aphasia battery, the South Alabama corpus that we talked about. And all of that is just available here by moving around the directory. Okay. Let's leave this and talk about some of the teaching tools. So with all of these wonderful resources, we tried to identify the best examples of traditional aphasia types to create Grand Rounds, which is an online guided tutorial about aphasia. It focuses on how language differs across aphasia types and severities and language tasks. So let's go over there to click on that. Oops, did I lose my, here we go. Okay, so this is in the teaching section, and I'll click on Grand Rounds. And at first there's an intro. And then the text has short case histories and discussion questions that are built around lots of video segments from dozens of people with aphasia. It also has treatment-focused questions to stimulate thinking about ways to approach intervention for each case presentation. And the blue rectangles link to embedded videos. So again, let me show you a short sample of the kind of thing that's included here. This is a person with Wernicke's aphasia.
How do you think your talking is these days?
Can't say what it's saying. I don't want your saying.
Can't hear me?
Say it again.
How do you think your talking is?
Yes, I can say that.
Do you understand what I'm asking you?
Very bad, but I can see it.
How's your talking?
Sometime good, sometime bad. I can't see what you said. Can you see?
Okay, so that gives you an example of some of the materials available at the Grand Rounds tutorial. And then there's also an examples link, which has very short video clips of common features of aphasia at the word level, the sentence level, and the discourse level. So this page, as you can see, is organized by features with a description and then links to video examples. So here I'll show you what one of these looks like. We'll go to circumlocution and we'll go to this clip. Each page will give a very brief description about the person, the aphasia quotient, the aphasia type, and what the task is. So remember, we're looking here at circumlocution.
But then what's the lady that comes and gives you wishes? She came.
Okay, so obviously that was the Cinderella story telling task. Okay, finally, there's a classroom activities link, which downloads a Word document that has ideas and exercises for activities like clinical assessment and treatment planning, measuring different aspects of discourse, coding speech errors, coding discourse behaviors, comparing across aphasia types, comparing across disorders. And several of these exercises have been contributed by AphasiaBank members too. So more thank you goes out to the community of contributors who share resources to help us teach and learn about aphasia. Okay, analysis tools. Brian spoke a little bit about this. Because all of the data is transcribed in chat format, we can use clan commands to do a lot of very powerful, efficient, and reliable analyses. And these are a few examples of commands that are relatively new clan commands that were added specifically for analyses related to aphasia. And they've been developed because we have these large databases available to study and because we've had some great collaborators. So a basic clan command, this one is not new, is more. That does the automatic morphosyntactic analysis on the transcript and puts 2 lines underneath each utterance. One has the lexical and morphological parsing, and the other has pairwise grammatical relations between words. Those are the backbones that support many of the other clan commands, like eval, which creates a composite of 34 outcome measures relevant to aphasia, like MLU, type token ratio, words per minute, open to closed class word ratios, propositional idea density, number of verbs per utterance, other measures like that. And because we have a big database for comparison, eval can be used to compare a person's performance with the whole database or with controls or with other people who are similar in age and sex and aphasia type. So those are really, really nice options with the eval command. Then CNNLA is a relatively new command that we were able to create with help from Cindy Thompson in her lab. This command automatically computes 50 measures from the Northwestern Narrative Language Analysis System. And likewise, the CQPA command produces the outcome measures from the quantitative production analysis by Rashan, Safran, Berndt, and Schwartz. It outputs 2 spreadsheets, one with scores for each utterance in the language sample, like number of words, number of open class words, number of nouns, verbs, pronouns, etc. And then the second output is a summary spreadsheet with the score totals for the whole sample across all utterances. And then 15 additional measures derived from those totals, like the proportion of pronouns in the sample, the proportion of verbs. And this CQPA command was possible with the help of Tatiana Schnorr and her lab. So for both the NNLA and the QPA projects, those labs provided expert manual scoring for large enough data sets so we could test the results of the automated commands and make sure the automated results were as good as or better than the manual scored results. And again, as Brian said, you still need to invest the time in transcribing. A good transcript is essential, but obviously these automated commands are game changers. They save so much time and training and provide reliable and valid quantification of connected speech. FluCalc has been developed through the FluencyBank project that Brian and Nan Bernstein-Ratner established. FluCalc performs fluency analysis of language samples in both raw counts and percentages of intended words. It computes about 60 fluency indicators, such as prolongations, broken words, part word repetitions, whole word repetitions, and so on. And we really encourage aphasia researchers who are interested in fluency to incorporate these markings in their transcripts and use these tools to learn more about fluency and aphasia. And then Brian talked about the TalkBank DB search engine, so I will skip over that. Finally, keeping in mind the title of this lecture, Data Sharing to Understand Aphasia, this slide shows that the AphasiaBank database has definitely been tapped to learn more about aphasia. The website here in the results section has links to publications and posters and presentations that have been done over the past 14 years that have used the data from the database. So if you click, for example, on the publications link, you can get a typical alphabetical bibliography from that link. And if you click on this link, you can get a chronological bibliography that also has links to the articles. So for example, we could click here and see Bree Stark's new paper with a bunch of colleagues in AJSLP. Okay, and then if you click on posters and presentations, you can see a list of all the posters and presentations that have been shared with us from conferences over the years and around the world. And again, there are hyperlinks that take you to the poster or presentation. So for example, if we click here at the top on Faroki Shah, we see a presentation that was done by Yasmin Faroki Shah at the Academy of Aphasia just this past fall. So again, we can't say it enough. Thank you to the community of researchers who continue to share these wonderful resources. But now I'm going to pass it back to Brian to give you some more meaty summaries of what these studies have helped us understand about aphasia. So stop sharing.
Okay. Well, I just want to sort of wrap up here with just a quick overview of the types of, by the way, can everyone hear me? Hear and see this? Dirk? Dirk?
Yes, we can hear you, Brian.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we understand the sort of the breadth of the types of issues that the database has been used for. And I really wanted to include all the publication and all the authors, but with over 250 articles, I can't fit them all here. So just going to mention the areas that people have looked at. Probably the most attention has been focusing on discourse analysis, which I think is quite appropriate. I think one of the emphases in AphasiaBank is on functional language use. You know, where there are many, many studies of confrontation naming, list recall, and those are important, but they don't necessarily tell us how well people are doing in terms of communicating with other people in their telling the stroke story, describing pictures, and this sort of more functional use. So that has been, I think, an important sort of different emphasis in AphasiaBank that I think has, you know, almost a greater importance to people understanding where are the gaps in their abilities for functional communication and so on. Okay, so anyway, these are the 7 areas: lexical diversity, grammar, gesture, fluency, classification of you know, aphasia types, and then the treatment effects. The discourse, first, on the one hand, I think Davida's already mentioned some of the measures, but to go down a little bit more detailed within things like eval and others, there's a focus on those discourse properties that are most clearly shown in the Cinderella story. There we know exactly what are the core lexical items that you should tell people about, sort of the glass slipper, the princess, the stepsisters, the fairy godmother, the pumpkin. So we're looking for those, whether the retelling of the Cinderella story includes that core lexicon. And then you can compare that in Broca's, Wernicke's, conduction with people that are, you know, in the control group or even latent aphasia and so on. Another approach to that is the main concept analysis. So it doesn't look just at the lexicon, but it looks at whether they've talked about going to the ball and so on. And then there's another type of analysis called the MSSG, main concept, sequencing, and story grammar, a little bit more structured. Another approach looks at correct information unit. And then there's also just more lexical things, moving average. We'll talk about the lexical, but all these are measures that reasonably can be applied to the Cinderella story, the peanut butter and jelly, or even things that are in the non-protocol area. Findings from this work are, you know, I could barely really summarize them all, but they really indicate that these measures like core lexicon and main concept analysis, they distinguish between the subtypes of aphasia, they distinguish aphasics from non-aphasics, even latent PWAs. So people who are not aphasic by WAB, but show some aphasic characteristics. And also this main concept analysis tells us about their ability of the participants to provide good information. So there are some contrasts between people who provide a lot of information, but it's not well structured, people who provide less information, but maybe the structure is good. There's also important genre differences between the narrative, the picture, and the procedural discourse in the stroke story. Now, all of these things I'm saying, each of these points is, you know, is some published article somewhere, okay? So, and this is really just, you know, skimming the top of the work on discourse. Another approach to discourse looks at coherence. Now that has been looked at rather more in dementia, but I think it's also important to look at coherence in aphasia. So this is the idea that maybe fluent aphasics produce utterances with new information, but somehow less coherent, whereas people with non-fluent aphasia may produce less new information, but at least what they do produce is more coherent. Okay. It's also very easy to do these automatic analyses of lexical diversity, and also lexical rarity is another issue. So there's a somewhat difference how diverse your lexicon is in your speech, whether you're using the same words, you know, in a sense, almost often empty words, or as opposed to more rare words. And there are a lot of measures of this, all going from matter to TTR, and another measure called WIM, which is not exactly diversity. It has more to do with statistical properties of interactions between words. anyway, this is a great area, and there's been many articles published using these methods to try to assess different subtypes and different genres and so on. Looking at the grammar here from a more linguistic-y point of view, you can look at phrases, frequent building blocks are common in Broca's. That they're repeated phrases. This would also come out in that n-gram analysis that you would do with TalkBankDB. The fluent aphasics produce more subordinate clauses. Again, Broca does not have the subordinate clauses. And in terms of argument structure, there's been a lot of literature, of course, on verb argument structure, but actually they're not always different between the different types of aphasics, or even comparing aphasics as this is from our moderator, Dirk Den Oden. So this is a kind of interesting area, and it's a tough one to explore because argument structure is not that easy to compute automatically. So we could talk about that. So onwards, weak verbs are used in storytelling. Things about Koreans produce more verbs than English PWAs produce more nouns, and that might just be a difference between Korean and English. There's very interesting work by Thorne and Frokey-Shaw about syntactic variability being continuous and, between types and so on. There have been a surprisingly large number of papers on gesture. Surprising because I think gesture is such a hard thing to study, but people realize that how important it is to understand how aphasics are using gesture. And the nice thing is that we have the videos so people can process, and we really want to do more and more in this area to try to find good methods of coding gestures. But the thing that stands out is that gestures are being used for missing words. The amount of gesture is not all that different between aphasics and the control people, but the types of gestures and the ways that they are used are really quite different from controls. Fluency, here's another paper by misspelled Frokey-Shaw, sorry, Bali Nazari and Yasmin Frokey-Shaw, had a really interesting structural equation modeling paper showing how crucial fluency is in understanding different aphasic subtypes. So I think that's to me, fluency, we think about fluent, non-fluent, but in fact, what we're talking about is different types of disfluency in aphasia, that the disfluency of Broca is very different from the disfluency of Wernicke. Davida and I have also done some work on ASR diarization at the phoneme level, using some data from Katrina Halley and Adam Vax. And this, script production also from Yuli Fredrickson and Gretchen Sabo, trying to get down to the level of the phoneme to see which phonemes are missing in people that have probably more apraxia of speech than only just aphasia. There's also now extending the Fluency Bank project to look at neurogenic stuttering. This is not developmental stuttering, not children who are stutterers, but people who stutter as a result of their phasic lesion. Okay. We've done some work on classification with our statistics colleagues at CMU, and using k-means clustering in a couple of papers. And that paper is now coming out. MLU has always been a strongest measure, but a lot of these other features play a role too. And I'll let you read that new paper that's coming out to see how complicated and interesting it is. Okay. We can also study latent aphasia using these methods, although WAB doesn't show these people as being different from controls. In fact, they are similar on some grounds, but on others you can distinguish them. On the other side of the spectrum of global aphasics, this is the work that Audrey did in the famous People Protocol, where there's pictures of Elvis and Bill Clinton and Marilyn Monroe and so on, and to what degree can you elicit memories, gestures, and associations? It's a great test, and I think it gives us a sense of of how much residual ideas and memories and cognition are in people who are having troubles getting them out in language. And finally, treatment effects. Davida already mentioned our interest in that, but we need more data in this area, right? Okay. So finally, I just want to mention new directions, and I'd like to also hear from people if they have questions. I think that automatic speech recognition is going to be a big part of going forward, being able to really categorize automatically disfluencies, matches from script training and so on. And crucially, we'd really like to add neuroimaging to the database. We weren't in a position to do that earlier, and now I think we really need to get organized to places like Open Neuro and so on to put the data there that would correspond to our AphasiaBank transcripts. We don't necessarily need to put them at our website. We could put them at some of these other websites that are already configured to have neuroimaging and have links back and forth. And as we've said now 4 times, we need more data on treatment effects. But I also think that we're open now to comparisons with related disorders. That was my speech error there. Apraxia, RHD, TBI, neurogenic studying, PPA, and also Alzheimer's disease, other forms of dementia. A lot of the same measures are being used in those areas. We even, we have cookie thefts across many of these things and so on. So I think that's a very promising area. So Ruth, thank you for your interest and attention. And if there are any questions, comments, ideas, and suggestions, I guess Dirk knows how to moderate, okay? Do I stop sharing, Dirk?
Oh, no, you can keep the screen on in case people have questions about the presentation. Thank you so much, Davida and Brian, for your wonderful presentation. I want to also take the opportunity once again, I think, to thank you for all the work you're doing for AphasiaBank, because it's a tremendous asset and a resource for the whole community, I think.
Yeah, well, thanks to you and other people at South Carolina have been pretty good, very good in contributing. So, of course, many other places too, but yeah, thanks, guys.
We have a question from Katerina Frakopoulou, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much for the talk and the information provided. And Katerina wants to ask a silly question. That's her words, not mine. In what terms do you distinguish protocol from non-protocol material? So probably this was explained at the beginning. I think you did talk about it, but she missed it. So
yeah, I'll let Davida do that one.
Okay. Do you want to? There's actually a protocol slide, Brian. If you want to scroll back to, I don't know if you have it, or I can share my screen.
I'm on 2 different presentations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can share my screen.
You can share.
Okay. But, let me share my screen and go back to that. Yeah. The protocol database simply refers to people who've done this standard set of tasks. Brian talked about this in the beginning as being unique to AphasiaBank, and then it was used again with TBI Bank and RHD Bank. But to have a unique, have a consistent protocol, a consistent set of discourse tasks that everybody does all around the country, and as we've said, including Canada and including other languages that it's been translated into, but it's a consistent set of tasks. So there's a script that you use, there are particular pictures that you show for the picture description tasks, and particular ways of administering all of these tasks. Plus there's a test battery, so we have WAB results and Boston naming test results and demographics on all of these people. So the protocol database refers to people who've done that set of discourse tasks and those tests. And then the non-protocol tasks are all these wonderful other sets of data that people have contributed that are also of great interest, that maybe WAB picture descriptions or cookie thefts or conversational data or other kinds of narratives, or some of those other things I talked about, like the gray oral reading test or the quick aphasia battery. So lots of other great resources that are just not part of this consistent standard discourse protocol. Hope that helps.
I could add just, we had an interesting conversation with a lady in Greece who was doing Greek data, and she said, well, how close is what I'm doing to the protocol? And we don't want to be too compulsive on this. So there are some variations that we understand would be locally necessary. Well, we talked about Vegemite and what was it, Vegemite and
cheese.
And cheese, you know, in Australia. And of course, when you translate the protocol into other languages, things change quite a bit. So for the language, and there have been also some people who cannot collect video and have only got the audio. And I think that's okay, not preferable, but because you wouldn't be able to do any gesture analysis. But a little bit of deviation from the protocol might be acceptable, but sticking with it would be really the best.
You can add chocolate sprinkles for the Dutch sandwiches, but it's much easier to make than a peanut butter jelly sandwich.
I heard about that. Yeah, the chocolate sprinkles, right? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, peanut butter is not the favorite universally, definitely not.
And I would add, we just had that one procedural discourse task in the standard protocol, and it would be nice to have more procedural discourse samples. But of course, there's always the push and pull of how much can you do, how many tests, how many discourse tasks. So you really, have to pick and choose. And so that's what we did.
Katarina says, thank you. So you've answered her question. I had a question, and I think you did actually address it, but I was just interested in the developments in linking the data to lesion information. So if you can talk a little bit more about that, how you envision that, and
yeah, I began. I'm sorry, what's his? I'm suddenly missing the name of the fellow at Stanford who has the open neuro. Goodness gracious, I'm sure you remember. But I started to look into how we could do that, and it does seem feasible that we could get scans of people who have the protocol. Gosh, when I say that name, you'll say, oh yes, but anyway, there is a special format that's needed. So I haven't gone all the way down, but at this point, I know that there are about 5 or 6 labs that say that they would be happy to share their scans. Not all of those have the protocols also done. So that, we really want to have both the protocol and the scans, ideally. But I think this is a top priority, is all I can say.
Yeah.
I also saw you had a question about automated acoustic analyses.
Yes, that was my next question.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, so we had already done this using some of Yuli's data and some other data we got, as I said, and it was very successful using a system called Speech Kitchen. We could really see, really phoneme by phoneme. We had a poster on this at the Academy of Aphasia several years ago. And we could see phoneme by phoneme where a person with apraxia was missing this phoneme, or, because we know exactly what the target was. But then that system really stopped being supported. But in the meantime, we are starting to work with these people. We must have, I don't know, Davida, how many, 200, 300 computer science labs around the world are focusing on this dementia, using automatic speech recognition. I mean, and Google and Apple and every little startup company around the world realize that this is a huge commercial and health problem. And if you can do detection using these automatic methods, and I'm actually working with some people at UMass Boston on this too, including North Carolina. So they are really focusing on automatic, because you could do transcription, but we now have a challenge at interspeech. There was one last year, and there's another one this year at interspeech. Who has the best methods? With these challenges, computer scientists, trying to out computer science the next guy with a better algorithm, better methods. And that basically is fascinating work. So I think that's going to be driving us, because we have so many people in that area already aware of the need. Having said that, automatic speech recognition is not perfect, and it's really not great for aphasics. So we really probably want to stick with the script basis where we really know what the target is. And yeah.
I was also thinking really even more about not even so much the automatic transcription, but rather acoustic analyses of the speech. So
yeah, that's right.
Formant analysis, for example. Once you know the target, you could link the
people in China have done some really fascinating work just looking at the acoustic analyses without even, not even the phonemes, showing the jitter and pause breaking and all that are so predictive. So that's a, using a classifier that gets at that. Now the other thing is diarization. So people in child language really care about trying to know who's speaking when, and was this an utterance and how long did it go? This is these sort of 16-hour day-long recordings. They have not solved that problem either, but they're now better than the off-the-shelf Lina system. These are people mostly in Paris, CNRS in Paris, who are working on this. Those folks are pushing on the diarization side. We have lots of people kind of advancing similar tools, putting it all together, and none of it's perfect yet. It's all 85%, Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think the name you were looking for earlier is Russ Poldrack.
Yeah, Russ, right. Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so I think that means we've come to the end of your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you again so much. I think the audience will also have to appreciate how Davida and my background is essentially the same. We're not in the same house, but we have the same stylistic preferences, right?
Okay. Oh, I see it.
The same books in our bookshelf.
They're bookshelf people. Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.